In February 2025, Russian forces launched a drone strike that severely damaged the protective sarcophagus covering Chernobyl's fourth reactor. The Guardian reports, the strike resulted in a gaping hole measuring 15 meters in the outer roof, igniting the internal insulation, which required over 2 weeks to extinguish. The sarcophagus, which was built in 2017 at a cost of 1.5 billion euros, now faces prolonged vulnerability to natural elements and corrosion, further threatening the containment of radioactive materials. The attack was carried out by a Russian drone costing just 75,000 euros, which led to an estimated 25 million euros in damage, according to preliminary reports from engineering experts. Fortunately, there was no radiological consequences from the strike, but the breach has raised concerns about the sarcophagus's ability to withstand weather conditions in the long term. Sergei Bokov, the chief engineer on duty at the time of the attack, described the initial shock, noting sensors recorded the impact resembling a 6 to 7 magnitude earthquake. However, the team quickly identified the drone as the reason, which flew low enough to avoid detection by radar systems. The attack left the sarcophagus exposed to the elements, increasing the risk of radiation leaks and water infiltration. Despite these alarming risks, the Ukrainian Ministry of Environment has assured the public that radiation levels remain within safe limits and are under constant monitoring. However, experts like American engineer Eric Shimon, who worked on the sarcophagus design, stress that repairs are necessary to avoid further structural degradation. He estimates the repair costs could range from tens of millions to possibly hundreds of millions of dollars. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which helped finance the construction of the sarcophagus, has acknowledged the severity of the damage and confirmed its involvement in the assessment process. A more detailed report on the full extent of the damage is expected in May 2025. Beneath the damaged sarcophagus lies a highly radioactive mass, including 200 tons of uranium from the reactor and 5,000 tons of sand, lead and boric acid that were dropped during the aftermath of the 1986 disaster. If the sarcophagus isn't repaired, the integrity of this critical structure could continue to deteriorate, posing long-term environmental and health risks. As the international community weighs in on funding the repairs, it's clear that the cost of restoration far outweighs the expense of the drone that caused the destruction. For now, the focus is on preventing further harm and ensuring the safety of future generations. At first glance, 9th of May parade should cheer up the Kremlin dictator Vladimir Putin, but there are 3 other big factors that will determine his behavior in 2025. Political philosopher, lecturer at Charles University in Prague, and head of the Free Russia Institute, Alexander Morozov, spoke about this in an interview with Glavred. According to him, May 9 will not allow Putin to feel stronger. But the dictator will be influenced by the protracted fall in oil prices, which is already being recorded around the world. It is even noticeable that the Russian political and military elite understands that the price will be able to hold out for some time at a level slightly above $45 per barrel, but not higher. The second important factor in 2025 is that the Kremlin is preparing, and not without reason, for Tauruses to be added to the economic sanctions. Since the ceasefire has failed, Moscow expects sanctions to be expanded in 2025. First of all, against the tanker fleet, against the remaining banks that are still operating, as well as the strengthening of secondary sanctions, which Trump has already announced. This will most likely be implemented, but one more step will most likely be added to the tightening of sanctions. Kiev will receive the missiles and ranges that it has long been asking for, Morozov noted. Ukraine is already demonstrating that providing more powerful weapons can be very effective, as demonstrated by highly effective strikes on Russian military installations and on installations associated with military production or storage facilities. The third factor of 2025 is that despite May 9 and the visits of some deputy ministers, foreign ministers, and there will be few top officials, all this will quickly pass, and the Kremlin will have to deal with the deterioration of relations with the countries of its immediate circle, the political philosopher explained. This is already partially evident from the ban on holding the Immortal Regiment in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Therefore, the situation for the Kremlin will continue to worsen. In addition, it should be noted that the entire second half of 2025 will be filled with important international events. This includes the summer NATO summit in The Hague and the G20 meeting in November. Before the summit in The Hague, the Kremlin will already face a new wave of reaction from the United States. Therefore, I think that the second half of 2025 will be marked by confrontation between Moscow and Washington, Morozov concluded. Russian dictator Vladimir Putin rejected the request of the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, occupied by the Russians, to resign from his post. This was reported by the Institute for the Study of War. It is noted that on May the 7th, Putin and Kadyrov met to discuss the socio-economic issues of the Chechen Republic. At the end of the meeting, Kadyrov thanked Putin for his positive assessment of the efforts of Chechen forces in Russia's war in Ukraine. Kadyrov stated that, "We will not let you down," to which Putin replied, "I have no doubt." The material says, analysts conclude that Putin expects Kadyrov to continue to rule Chechnya. Kadyrov announced his desire to resign on May the 5th, but the next day noted that only Putin could sanction this decision. According to the forecasts of the Institute for the Study of War, the likely resignation of Ramzan Kadyrov from the post of head of Chechnya, occupied by the Russians without a suitable successor, may threaten the stability of the regime of Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. It became known the other day that due to the aggravation of the disease, Kadyrov began to choose a successor. It may be his son Adam, who is called a young copy of Ramzan. Persistent rumors since 2023 suggest Kadyrov suffers from a serious illness, likely kidney or liver related. He's been seen with visible swelling, limping and periods of public disappearance. Medical treatment in Moscow or abroad was reportedly sought in 2023 to 2024. If his health is deteriorating, he may want to preemptively control the succession and exit on his terms, rather than collapse in office. Kadyrov may be testing Kremlin response, offering resignation to signal fatigue or loyalty, but staying if asked to. This has been a tactic used by other loyalists to extract more guarantees, immunity, or budgetary concessions. By resigning voluntarily, he avoids a humiliating ouster and ensures his family's continued role in Chechnya. After Prigozhin's mutiny and death, the Kremlin has grown wary of powerful paramilitary actors like Kadyrov. Kadyrov's personal army, propaganda operations and de facto sovereignty in Chechnya have become harder to justify, especially as his troops underperform in Ukraine. He publicly criticizes Russian generals. He pushes his son Adam into the national spotlight. The Kremlin may be nudging him to transition power or reduce his influence under a controlled narrative.